Integrated Design Certainly, I'd like to welcome this gentleman. I'd like to welcome you all in, but this gentleman, Nicky Cruz, come a very long way to be here. So, Miguel Guitart is a Spanish architect. He's come from Madrid, where he has a practice, and he also teaches architecture in Madrid. He's a licensed architect in Spain, and he studied as an undergraduate in Spain, and then in the graduate program at the GSD in Harvard as a Fulbright scholar. And so he received his MA from the GSD in 2003, and then subsequently worked in Chicago before returning to Spain. And he established his practice there after he returned to Spain, and that practice has won a number of awards. His work's been selected with the work of others in young architects in Spain, and it's currently touring in the United States. In terms of teaching experience, he was taught at Harvard and the Boston Architecture Center, and is currently teaching as a senior professor at the University of Salamanca. Is that correct? Yes. Sorry. And he's also completing his research for his PhD. And the topic of the research is architecture as filter. Please join me in welcoming Miguel Guitart.
Thank you. No, I'll be keeping this in my hand. First of all, thank you. I want to thank you, the University at Buffalo, the School of Architecture and Planning, Dean Shibley, Chairman Omar Khan, and the rest of the faculty for inviting me today here and being able to speak a little bit on my work and my particular interest in the exercise of architecture. Can you hear me well? Yes? Okay. I chose this drawing by Bjorn Knudsen to illustrate the title of this lecture called Three Arms, One Mind. The three arms that of the title allude to the three actions that, to me, integrate the exercise of the architecture. That is research, teaching, and the professional practice. The three constitute the tripod in which I understand my role as an architect, and they all come together when I teach, when I do research, when I design, and when I build. The three of them happen simultaneously, or at least that's what I try to achieve, and I believe a balance of the three is likely to be the proper position for a practicing architect. I will go over them briefly. I know we don't have much time, and I will start with research. So after a number of years of work, and under the title of Filters of Light and Vision, Visual Construction of the Architectural Limits, my PhD is, the reading of my PhD is scheduled sometime around Christmas this year. I first became interested in the architectural filters through the study of some vernacular architecture, as well as some studies on optical and material perception. I realized that filters have been present throughout history, providing unique solutions to architecture that constructed emotional interior spaces. These spaces were particularly interesting for thought, for reflection, and for introspection, while being at the same time very efficient in every other sense, from passive energy-saving systems to mechanics for the control of vision, and a number of others. The aim was therefore to explore how these elements conform the space behind them and their different material, construction, and structural strategies. The use of filters soon appeared to me as a universal element that could be found almost in any culture without regards of geography or time. And these filters, to me, created some sort of transitional space. A space that does not belong to the inside or the outside, but somehow create a third kind of space that happens in between and the acts that act both as a physical and as a conceptual space. This conceptual intermediate threshold relates to the inside and the outside, as I said, in this emotional process, and through the exploration of a series of participating agents. The PhD has gone through issues of limits, issues of border, geometry, vision, inside and outside, light, shadow, matter, among others. I explore the changing conditions of space and how architecture can be conceived through the use of filters. I'll now go over the different chapters and sections so you can get an idea, a very quick idea of how I have structured this particular interest. I will not be commenting, this is a summary, I will not be commenting on the specific images, but I wanted to illustrate so you get an idea of the material that I've been working on. The first chapter is on the filter as an architectural limit, and the first section deals with the approaches to the notion of the limit. The second one, this first chapter, is on the idea of trespassing the limit. The third one will explore the contour conditions of these filters, whereas the fourth one works on the geometry of the filters. The last, no, not the last one. The next one has to do with the space of light and shadow and how these conform spaces and qualify the interior space. And the next one poses an exploration from tradition to abstraction in the history of filters, to end up this first chapter with the idea of a dissipated space. I'm sure you recognize many of the images inside. The second chapter is titled The Filter as a Threshold of Transition. And then I explore four different sections. The first one is the vision of the horizon in the interior space. The second one has to do with the hidden view and the acoustic condition. The next one deals with the idea of exterior landscape and interior landscape. And the last one of this second chapter has to do with the transitional space, where I deal with Japanese concepts of the ma and the ingawa as spaces that relate the inside and the outside, being both physical and conceptual spaces. The next chapter deals with the strategies for the construction of filters. And this chapter has 5 different parts. The first one of these deals with the natural structure and the artificial structure, and how sometimes natural filters become architecturalized and architectural filters become naturalized. The next one has to do with the structure of the filter. And then I focus on the concepts or the strategies of the subtraction and the addition. Those two operations that will lead from now on in the research any generation of a filter. The next section is one of the first two, the stereotonic filter and the predominance of matter on air, whereas the next section is the opposite, the tectonic filter and the predominance of air in matter, on matter. The next section goes from perforated enclosure to desegregated armature. And so the fourth chapter, which is actually the last but most important of probably or at least is half the research, has to do with the generation of these strategies. This chapter is divided into 5 categories, different categories, and 10 different projects. Every category has 2 different projects that try to illustrate concepts that I explore. A summary of these categories are, as you can see, the origin, the density, the thickness, the function, and the transmission. Here you have again a summary of how the chapter develops and divides into different sections, and we'll go again over these examples to give a better idea. The first category is origin. Then I make a distinction between filters of air and filters of earth. For the first one, the earth, I explored the royal bath, the Comares Palace in La Alhambra, in Granada. And the second one is the Fronton Recoletas, which might be less known to you. I didn't find a proper word for fronton, but fronton is where the pelota game takes place, so you can get an idea. This fronton doesn't exist anymore. It was lost in the war. The next category has to do with density. Density classifies filters between heavy and light filters. For the first one, I explored the Melnikov House in Moscow, Russia, of 1927. And for light filters, I explored the Hunter College, which you have very close to the Bronx of New York, by Marcel Breuer and Robert Gatley in 1959. Then I go into thickness as another category, and I explore the shallow filters and deep filters. Shallow being the Circassian Rosa in Ahmedabad, India, which explores textile-like type of patterns made out of stone. As for the deep filters, although there are many other options in the work of Le Corbusier, I decided to explore the Tower of Shadows in Chandigarh, which is a much lesser known project. Then I go into function. Function divides, to me, filters in two types: those that deal with enclosure and those that deal with structural issues. For the structural section, I work with the Seattle Public Library by Oma and Rodolphus in Seattle, Washington. For the enclosure filters, I explored the Domino's Winery in Napa Valley by Herzog and de Meuron, 1998. And the last of these five categories has to do with transmission. Transmission of a message. So there are filters of voice and filters of silence. Filters of voice being those that carry on a message, something that the architect wants to transmit, whereas the filters of silence are those that stay silent to let the space speak on its own. For the first example, I have the church in Ronchamp by Le Corbusier, 1955, and for the second one, a good example of a great architect, Rudolf Schwarz, Heilige Family Kitchen in Oberhausen, Germany, from 1956, of 1966. So I conclude the research with the proclaim of a conscious return to the use of the axial flow filter. This element has been enriching the history of architecture with no regard to geography or time, anywhere, anytime. The filter has built wonderful examples, that create spaces of magic introspection, that have a huge potential in terms of energy, security, vision, or compositional control. Okay, for this research, I brought a summary slide. Writing and publishing to me is very relevant because once you do your research, you have to communicate, you have to transmit, to let others participate of that research. So to me, writing and publishing is a key action in any kind of research. This part, you see a number of them. I've been able to publish a number of articles, which I think they are a natural consequence of any relevant research. Some of these articles have to do with my PhD research. Others have to do with other architectural issues that I'm also interested in. Issues that have to do with perception, with the vernacular, the use of traditional materials, and in this sense, I think there are very, very interesting two options in the school. With those, from those 4 blocks, you have 2 of them that are particularly similar or coherent with this type of research. Ceramics is also something, and you can see it as an illustration. It's not something I really have a contact with in Spain. We have congresses every year for the National Association for the Ceramics Industry, and they pay for publications, for workshops with the students, and so on. And also, finally, the teaching of architecture is another of my interests. How we deal with students, how we deal with the transmission of the knowledge of the architecture is another of my interests in terms of research. Then I go into teaching. This is a photograph of me and my business partner, so you get given a lecture. For me, teaching, which I started actually participating in some of the sessions at the Career Discovery Program in the GSD in Harvard, but also I was able to start collaborating with the Boston Architectural Center for 2 semesters in 2002, 2003, and then back in Spain, I had the opportunity to join a growing school of architecture, the Pontifical School, University of Salamanca in Madrid, who opened a new school. To me, there are a number, among others, of issues that are quite important when teaching architecture, and these I came up with 7, but I think to me it's important that students assume the learning experience as an integration or converging disciplines within the school, within the learning process. I think it's important for students to understand that architecture comes from the building of emotions. So it is important that they become quite capable of going from the concept to the reality, from the idea to the final construction. They are dealing with real issues. Those issues actually take us to the third point. It's important for students to develop the ability to work with different realities. Realities that go from social, the economical, the sustainable, etc. But all these different realities have to be taken care of during the process. So architecture becomes a global understanding of our world. For students, it's also important to be able to provide universal solutions to specific problems and go from the abstract to the specific, back and forth during the learning process, as we probably do as practitioners. Also, it's important for the students to be aware of the responsibility that architecture entails as a contribution to society. People experience the consequences of our work. So our work is not only theoretical, but it's going to be built, and people will suffer or enjoy our spaces. So it is really important to assume this social responsibility. I think it's something to keep in mind. The next point is the importance, to me, that students develop soon, early in the process, or as much as possible, a criteria of their own, a critical attitude towards architecture, so to obtain an autonomous capacity to differentiate and design. Because the sooner students are able to have their own criteria, the sooner they can become critical to their own work. At some point, students will not have professors next to them guiding them, so they need to be self-critical. And the last one is very important, to promote permanent inspiration. I think without passion, this profession has no sense. I was talking to Tim, one of the students, and we were talking about this, that maybe a good professor is not the one that knows more, but the one that is able to transmit more enthusiasm and more passion. So this far, I've been able to be part of at least 16 studios. 16 semesters, starting, as you see, from the fall 2002, up to one that we're developing now, that ends in June. I'll go again over them very quickly so you get an idea of what the exercises have been, where, with what institution, and what the objectives were. First one, in the fall 2002, with the BSc, we worked on the design of a tourist information booth in Harvard Square. There, we dealt with architecture as a social event, with the intervention in a highly intense urban node, and the issues of the relationship between the campus and the city, university campus. This next semester we worked on the Boston Arboretum and to design an aviary, and in this case students were asked to deal with the coexistence between nature and architecture, interaction, the tectonic architecture, the architecture as an enclosure, light structures, and issues on visibility. Then, years later, in 2006, when I started teaching at the Pontifical School in Madrid, we started with the Arco Art Fair, which you may know, and students were asked to deal with issues on distribution, issues on plan distribution, knowledge, and practice. The next semester, we worked on the dual situation of the urban years, early learning years, and how the domestic and the social in the school worked together. So how in the school, domestic and social learning. Issues of the scales and the exploration of these spaces, but also interaction between these private and public spaces. The next year, I organized the semester so the students would work very significantly with 4 basic architectural tools, in this case being the plan, the section, the model, and the image. So they developed a cultural center in Santander, in Spain, in the site that you can see empty right there. And the next semester, some of it included also some of the work of some students, which I won't be talking about because that would take a long time, but so you get some ideas of the work that has been developed. The next semester we worked in India. We proposed to students to design a youth hostel in Varanasi, and they dealt with issues of border. If you know the city, it's a very particular situation. It's created in the so-called Ghats, those stairs that lead to the sacred river. The intensity of the city becomes particularly strong in this border, and that's where students were asked to design the youth hospital. So there were issues of coexisting situations like the timeless sacred and the contemporary tourism, the void versus the field of the city, and as I said, the intervention in urban boundaries. Then we went to Turkey, and we proposed to design a new Prada store in Istanbul. Here you see the drawing by Le Corbusier. We worked with issues that had to do with the contemporary intervention in a traditional and a historical site, being Prada such a extremely contemporary, or the issues that Prada has on the table are so contemporary in a very traditional city, and also issues of the rational and the symbolic approaches at a cross-cultural enclave. These are some of the images of the work of the students. Then the spring 2009, we still were working in Turkey, but in this case they had to design an archaeological museum in Ephesus. So they had to understand the place, think about architecture without architecture, and how to intervene in the site without transforming it. This is a panel for the exhibit at the end of the course. One of the things that I wanted to take with me or to implement in the school is some of the dynamics that I found or explored at the GSD, that is these dynamics of letting others knowing about the work that was being done in the studio. So exhibitions, publications, things of the sort were really important to me, so students got their works known for others, and there was this cross-interaction within the school. The next exercise was a traveling theater in Jordan. We were able to go, we went to Turkey, we went also to Jordan, and we organized this, the next 2 semesters, as 2 opposites. This one being about the tectonic, the lightness, the prefabrication, the assemblage and transportation, and the next one, I'll show you first some of the proposals. That's it. And the next one was dealing just on the opposite side, the serotonic, the heavy architecture, the permanence. And in this case, the exercise was our scientific library in Petra. Okay, we're getting to the end of these studios. Then we also organized a 2-semester sort of course, but in this case, it dealt not with opposites, but with identical situations. First one, we told 2010, we proposed a religious study center near Roncham in France. And so the objectives were about the symbolic architecture, how to arrive, how to enter, and how to stay, understanding the place, and the idea of contemporary architecture as a legacy. We will see that the next semester proposed exactly the same terms, but with a different exercise. So it was like a 2-fold approach for a single idea. In the second case being an outdoor chapel in the surroundings of La Tourette, also in France. So the objectives were the same. And then we get to last year's semester. In this case, we stayed in Madrid, and we proposed to design and work on the urban and housing development in Entrevías, which is a very rundown area in the outskirts of the city. Here, students were doing research on how to add to the urban fabric, how to solve border problems, because you can see all these borders here was the area for the intervention, these much higher than this area. So these borders here was the proposed site for the students to work. Also, issues on public and private realms were important, and also the overlapping scales that happened in the city. These are some of the exercises, and you probably see that in the exercises, I really emphasize the importance of going from the concept to construction documents. So to me, my students try to go from the very conceptual to almost a CD at the end of the semester. Here's another exercise. Exhibition. And that is the spring 2010. We worked much closer to where we are. The Mies van der Rohe Foundation at the IIT campus in Chicago was an idea that we had to work on issues of representation and integration, the memory and the canvas. And also a critical situation which had to relate the building of the students or the intervention of the students with two. This was the site proposed. Here we have the Crown Hall, here we have the Courses Building. So there was also this issue of relating to two very special projects that took place in the campus. And this year, this academic year, I have organized the 2 semesters in a single site. We've been working in the San Michele Cemetery in Venice, in Italy. Issues on the place, the scale, and the memory, or again, the idea of arriving, entering, and staying in the site, the idea of the problem of the architect. Also, the natural versus the artificial, and the possible actions of a possibly dead city, which is a very interesting issue in Venice. There are 4 exercises in 2 semesters. Some of them are very quick. The 2 first are very quick to testing starting points, the entrance pier for visitors, a monument for the artist, a complimentary chapel, and the extension of the cemetery. We're now working on this, but I brought some of the material that the students have submitted this far. To me, it is important that the students develop the capability of providing solutions and finding their own resources. Because the future architect needs to know about many things, but most of all about architecture. I think it's important to teach students to work on their own criteria, as I said before, and to become permanently inquisitive. Also, the necessary inspiration is a very important issue, but the development of their own capacity to solve any kind of architectural situation by deftly combining the multiple information of every project they have to deal with. Working with the studio has also these 2 issues that I have mentioned, that I really emphasize them, that goes from the idea to the reality. The need that the students go from the conceptual to the built work, and this connection between the conceptual, the idea, the thinking, the theoretical starting point, to the real issue, right? Also, the creation of architecture to me is very important as the integration of different disciplines. I normally invite professors from other disciplines like structure, construction, mechanicals, so students learn that those issues happen at the same time, from the very beginning. They don't happen at different stages, which is something students normally think or may tend to think. They have to think that mechanicals can actually be the motor of their project, like Pompidou Center, for instance. Or structures can be the main issue in their concept. And for this, it is important that they understand the learning process as an integral process, right? Those stages, consequently, should take place simultaneously, and that is why to me it's so important that students understand this approach as an integrated design issue. Also, another issue that I have mentioned to emphasize a lot and to end this part of the presentation is the responsibility they have as architects. Architecture is not art, it's not a frivolous kind of science. It deals with very important issues that have a repercussion in the society. And to me, that is very important for students to understand from the very beginning. What they do, the work they do, is not something that only appears in a magazine, but something that people enjoy, suffer, they learn, and construct their lives, right? So they have this privilege but also this with enormous responsibility. Okay, and then I think up here, this one. I go into the practice, the third and last part of this presentation. In the last 10 years, we've had this practice, we've been able to design and build a number of projects. I was doing some research on what we've done this far, and we've worked on a total budget on design and construction of budgets of almost $60 million and total area of 1.2 million square feet, just to have an idea of the work we've done. I believe our professional approach has to do with a particular aspiration to a certain absence of design. I'll show some scattered images, since I will be talking on 5 different projects, but I wanted to illustrate a little bit more with those images. A certain absence of design, the importance that the final user also participates in the design of his or their architecture. A certain timelessness, it's important to us, a certain politeness when integrating our work in the built environment. I think it's very important. And I think there is a sentence by Runkhover that reflects very well our approach to architecture, and that is when he said that where there is architecture, nothing else can happen. There are a number of other issues that are present in our approach, words or concepts or ideas about order, rhythm, the expression of materiality, this certain desire for invisibility or for anonymity, the mentioned politeness or courtesy, the consciousness of adding to the existing city, to adding to the existing layers of time and history. Words of collaboration, integration, quality, and finally, which is one of our last words of the catalog, is happiness. We are here to create some sort of happiness. I think it's a very important word. So I will go over 5 projects, one non-winning proposal for a competition, which is something we work very often. The systems of competitions is very, or has been up to now, very efficient in Spain. I'm saying up to now because now there are no competitions, it's the crisis. And then 4 projects that have been built, and the final one that is in the process of being constructed. The order of those, this is not where this is an animated GIF, okay. The order of those projects go from the left to the most important social relevance to some extent. The project that I'll be showing shortly. Okay, those 5 projects, we have a list here. The first one is this multipurpose complex center in the city of Yeves, in Guadalajara, Spain, not Guadalajara, Mexico. And then the others is a showroom for Italian furniture in Madrid, a government office building in Tarragona, near Barcelona in Spain, 98 units for social housing in Madrid. And the biggest project we have right now is the Santa Maria Parish Center in Tarragona as well. It should be, work should be starting sometime in the end of the year. Okay, the multipurpose complex center in Yeves, Guadalajara. I'll have to go a little quick since we don't have much time left. The city of Yenes is this one over here, and the importance of the city comes from the line of the high-speed train, which goes all the way up to Barcelona, which is this line over here. So this is a kind of artificial city, a dormitory city that is growing due to a new stop for that train in the north of Madrid. The site is this one, this plot of land next to this green area here, and you can see the whole city has almost nothing at the time of the competition. So the city was requiring center for their institutions, but a center that also would give an image, like an icon, something that would make the city recognizable. You can see the site over here, very ugly buildings around, housing buildings, and this is the green area that we've seen in the other photograph. This painting by Bruegel really inspired us as a place of gathering, a community space. The city needed a community space where they could have their social life that at that point they were not having. So also the game of the Tangram was a reference for our work. You probably know this Chinese game, and it was also another reference. So we started doing some quick organizations in plan, trying to arrange, because we were asked to provide a 10-phase project, 10 buildings that could be built in 10 different stages. So at some point, we came up with this organization and the plan. It's a very big project. You can see all the buildings that allow to connect these big areas inside with the existing fabric around. This was acting as a main gate. This green area would be here, and this is a city hall, the new city hall. So the whole space would become a communal space for people to have to meet, to gather, to have social gathering, to do everything. And we wanted to explore the scale of what we were proposing, and so we overlapped our plan with different urban situations that we all know. This is St. Peter in Rome. We have the footprint of the project, but we also have Barajas Airport. We also have the Plaza Mayor de Salamanca, the Cathedral of Seville, the Plaza de San Marcos in Venice, and of course, the Bernabeu Stadium in Madrid. Okay, so these are some of those competition images that we're proposing a kind of very anonymous type of architecture, where the only moves that took place were these ones at the entry of the main plaza, so as to create an icon, because we knew that without icons the city could not be recognizable, we could not be recognized. So there was this need to create a very visible, very clear element that would make an immediate reference to the city. Okay, then we go into the Narrow space. This is a small showroom in Madrid, which has to do a lot, quite a lot with my research on sensors. As you will see, the project takes place here. Okay, this is Madrid. This is the southwest. Atocha is right here, and this is a neighborhood, consolidated urban fabric, and we probably had this space here inside a block of the city. And they wanted to do. They were three brothers, and they were traditional carpenters, and they wanted to have a very significant space not only for the selling of Italian furniture, but also to organize social events. Actually, the final crate has been used for TV spots, for meetings to be rented, etc. So the entry, it was really ugly. You had to go through this alleyway. This is actually housing. The entrance was awful, right? But it was even more awful what we found in the courtyard. The family had this really run-down type of industrial space, but the volumetry, the volumes had to be somehow kept because of the norm, so we say. You can see from the second floor, that is another side which is empty. There is no construction, and this is the ceiling of this first floor that we've seen before. That portion here. So we decided to, that you can see, that's where we enter. That's the alley at the beginning. This is a very ugly rear facade of those housing apartments, and this is what we have, or what we have. So we had to do something with this, but at the same time, we needed to isolate ourselves, the space that we would create from the ugly view of these rear facades, but also we couldn't just block the view of those houses because we were not in the right to just have a wall. So we decided to, we were inspired, again, my research, this beautiful photograph by Herb Briggs taken in the 50s in Torremolinos in Spain. This idea of the shade and the very graphic shadows and the vision through it. So we decided to take the alleyway, to demolish the first box, create another one of glass, maintain the second one, and wrap the whole envelope with a skin of wooden slats, which would refer to the material that this family has been working on for years, but at the same time would be light enough as to propose a non-invading or not blocking relationship between the houses and the space. You can see this is a front elevation, the two-story building behind that we refurbished, and then this glass box of just 1 story high, with this scheme that goes all the way around, wrapping the entrance and the facade. And this is the result. The very ugly alley now leads to a very nice space. And you see this scheme of road that turns around and takes this sort of portico to shine at the entrance. And this glass is also not frozen, but what? The process, that's right. Okay, to 1 meter, 30 centimeters, so there would never, through the visit, there would never be a visual relationship with the housing that would take place on the lower floor. We'll see some images inside. So this sort of Japanese graveyard garden wouldn't allow visitors to get in, but you would get a view of that long garden that would be seen from inside. Huh? So the photo montage. So this is 130 centimeters. So you get an idea that you never have a direct relationship, visually speaking, with this house, and we also managed to paint the back facade so that was a little better. You see, this is the portico. We enter under this pergola. You see the frosted glass with the reflection and the wood slats that float around the building. And then we're inside. The furniture is fantastic because all these wonderful pieces brought from Italy. And actually, the property wanted to organize the interior as a house. So that at the end is the kitchen, and the kitchen would allow to organize, catering, and in order to get the most out of the space in terms of use. This is a view of the entry from the inside. You can see that only this garden of Greenwood can be seen from inside, so you don't get this bothering relationship, bothering for us, but also for the house, for the people living in the apartment. And you get three-flight stair to the upper story, which was conceived more as a workspace, a work area for those three brothers who were the owners of the business. And then we go out to the terrace, which is probably the culmination of the walk around the space. This terrace is where the furniture, the outdoor furniture is actually exhibited, but it's also the most social of all the areas inside the building, right? So you can have meetings here. This is the pergola seen from the second floor. And you're not being bothered, and you're not bothering neighbors which are really close, but at the same time this scene stays really light, so it's not invading somehow the vision of the neighbors. Okay. The next project, it's a government office building in Montblanc, this in Tarragona, northeast of Spain. This work was it's a small building. Somewhere around here. Okay. This is the medieval center of the city, a small city, you can see. Okay, and our building is going to be used by people who care about agricultural issues in the area, right? So there will be a need for employees to park their cars, take showers, to go away, so it's very interactive with the nature around the building. So the building is very simple. Here you have some sections. There is, as you will see, maybe here. There is a podium or a tent made out of rough stone, as we will see later, and it's a single piece made of stone where a single move in the volume will indicate where the entry is. You see that this move goes up to organize the significant entry of the building. Here you have some construction, which is always good to show. And this is a view of the building. Okay, you see that out of the same stone, you get this plank or podium made of local sandstone. This is it's called, in Spanish it's called costeros, which is like the remnants when you in the quarry. But they have a very powerful materiality. So the same stone is the one that covers the building volume. And here this action indicates that the entry takes place here, and then otherwise it's a very simple building. Here you have some images of the entry. You see the podium will be going around. Go around, and there's a ramp, and then the cars, the employees are located here in the basement, and they have a direct access to that area of showers and changing, so they can enter the building around and not from the more bureaucratic entry. The interior is absolutely white. We wanted to keep it totally clean and very pure, with the exception of some elements like the handrails and the windows that would bring a very graphic significance in the inside, but otherwise everything is very, very organized, white and silent and luminous. The next project, 4 out of 5, is this group of 2 buildings for 98 units for social housing in Madrid, in the outskirts. The building is partly located here. these two buildings that are facing somehow this area that is going to be or used as a green area in the city. Those two buildings wanted to, as you can see in this section, we wanted to organize an interior garden that would complement the use of the houses, but also this garden would have a strong relationship with the street here and the park there. So there was some sort of transition that has to do with that issue that I have mentioned in the process to arrive, to enter, to stay, which is a very interesting sequence. Unfortunately, the developer, you know how this works, and we couldn't keep this lower floor totally open, but just some alleyways that I'll be showing. This is the plan. This is the street and the green area here. We were able to leave just these corridors to this half, to this green space that is half public, half private, as a transitional to the units. Here we have some plans, and one of the characteristics of this project is that there are terraces. You can see elements, the ones with the lines, that act as a third space. It's not interior, it's not exterior, it's something else. It is a terrace, as we can see in this photograph, that can actually be appropriated by the owners or the people who live there in different manners. As an exterior space, an interior space. Here we have a front elevation of the block that faces the yet-to-be green area. Of course, these commercial spaces are still closed. I don't know why they didn't let us maintain that lower space totally open to integrate it with the garden. You can see in terms of materiality, the exterior is made out of prefab concrete pieces, whereas the interior, those two facades that face the interior garden are covered by translucent polycarbonate. So the materiality is much softer inside. It's kind of more bland. It's not that hard as it is outside because of the concrete. These are the views of the outside. And another interesting issue that happens here with this idea of giving an added quality to these otherwise very simple, very cheap houses is that these windows that you actually see as very narrow, they are actually twice as tall as you can see them. But half of it is covered by that translucent skin. So at night you start seeing, doubling those windows twice. That then allows for not only the composition of the facade, but also for the light filtering and some sense of privacy. Unfortunately, I don't have photographs at night, which it's like, where are them? No? Because that would show a very clear image of what we pretended. You can see that there is a variation in the height of the windows. So this window really goes up to here, down to here, or this goes up to there. That's the idea. This is a view from the garden inside, and these are views of those alleyways. And I want to show you some images of that third space, which you have here, which in the sides of the building becomes a real privilege because you have cross vistas in the terrace. So this is actually a small terrace for a social house, but you have these incredible openings that allow you to have unexpected views from the house. And users were able to appropriate those spaces the way they thought. This is the last image. You can see the reflections of the material. And finally, this is our last project, the one that is going to be built. It's in Santa Maria Parish Center in Tarragona. Okay, the site is here. This area here, on this? Yes, this has to be demolished. Okay, this area here is our site. So our site is actually privileged because we're facing all this is a green area. So 2 of the 4 sides of the building faces green spaces of the city. This part of the city is actually a little problematic, so there are social issues that have to be faced somehow in the program and in the location of the program here. So you see, this might be a little early to show, but this is a park, this is a pedestrian area, an avenue, and the greater portions of our proposal. So these are a few images so you can see the site. Here it's a little problematic area. This is the site. This is the site in front. This is the park across the street. So you get an idea. And this is a pedestrian area in front of it, right? So we worked with references, which is something we work on all the time, and we were not only having a look at contemporary projects, but also projects from history, where we can learn a lot. These are some images I had to cut off because we have so many. We have a studio with so many examples of sacred architecture. This is Willis Schwartz, a wonderful church in Aachen, Akisbern. Milan and Pisa, in Portugal. But the key to the site was given to us by this plan by Borromini. You can see that the way he organized this Baroque church is to organize a more rational approach in these 2 sides that were relating to the built city, whereas the corner that was relating to the public space would have a different element that in their case, in his case, would contain the most significant space, which is the church itself, the nave. So these are some of the final models, but then we finally organized the plan in this way. We organized an L-shaped building where we contained all the complementary uses, the rectory, offices, housing for the priests, etc. And we liberated the corner to locate the main volume of the church, because 2 were the premises for this project. That we wanted to have present monumentality and mystery. We thought those would be the 2 key issues that we were dealing with through the project. So the church becomes separated volume, and by separating the volume, it becomes much more significant. This autonomous element that follows a corner scheme becomes strategically more significant in the overall project, because also this L-shaped building that we have in the site becomes a sort of anonymous curtain that lets the volume of the church speak on its own. You can see a front elevation here. You can see a rendering here of the final shape. You see the other building side. This is made of stone, local stone, white yellowish. But this is some sort of a perforated metal screen that goes all the way around. So it's embracing or underlying the importance of the real volume of the church. This is a cross section. The most interesting thing is about how this section happens. The lighting of the interior, which is all the openings. The idea is to have them made with alabaster. And otherwise, you can see that the interior of the space is very silent, very nude. And there is also another important area, is this project that happens between the L-shaped building and the volume of the space. This space here is a space that relates to the existing public space out in the street. So this space can actually work as an expansion to the city and contain social meetings, events that take place in the city, etc. This is one of the entrances to the church, and the church happens there. Also, issues on artistic, well, this is more of an anecdote. We're working with an artist in Spain, trying to make a composition for the furniture and all the artistic elements. Here's a model that it's a huge model that we made, where you can see some studies of light and the space. You probably get a better sense of what the project is like here. There are these very, very thin columns that are a reminder of the typical columns of the basilica plans, or in this case they become so slender because we want to accentuate this, the verticality. This is a view of the exterior. You can see this building, this soft kind of scheme that it wraps around, are the more significant abstract elements that is the church. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a few minutes for questions, so we're still late, but all the questions. Okay.
I don't know if I've been a little fast, because there was so much material that I wanted to show.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, I'm very interested in a project which is starting soon on construction site. So, as regards construction, what is your role, or your office's role actually in the construction?
Oops. Sorry, can you repeat the question? What is my role?
The church will soon start construction.
Yes.
And what is the role of the office? Are you like supervising construction? Are you making construction management too?
I'm afraid we're in charge of everything. That's very much a Spanish way. I mean, we don't calculate the structures, we don't calculate the mechanicals, but we are actually the site directors. I don't know what the translation would be. But we do our construction documents, we take control of the construction process, everything.
So you have separate tender packages, and you...
A separate?
Tender packages, or like making windows, foundation work?
I don't know what those packages are.
When you did packages with drawings, or do you did the whole job together, the whole project together?
We normally submit the whole project for bidding, and the constructor will what's the word? Will bid, actually? Is it for the entire construction? So it's not that we don't act as contractors ourselves. We are not taking. We might say, okay, we want these windows, or we have a very clear idea of what the lighting should be, or but then we work with the contractor. We don't work as contractors in that sense. So we don't have those separate pieces of problem.
Yes, in the teaching that you have done, if you were able to do some seminars of your own choosing, what kinds of things would you want to be wanting to take on with your students?
Well, there are so many interesting issues that I would like to explore. Well, I think there those issues that I would like to work on. They probably come from what all the things that I said, like not only my topic that I'm interested in, but also the procedures where people teaching. So topics, well, I'm interested in material, I'm interested in the vernacular, I'm interested in perception, but I also think it's very important for students to go from the conceptual to the construction. So it depends if it's a studio, it depends if it's a seminar. You said a seminar, but maybe my problem is that I like architecture so much that I can become engaged with many different issues. Huh? I know that doesn't answer your question, but
okay, I'm not conscious of the time. So I'd like to thank you very much.
thank you. Thank you.